Hello everyone and welcome to this week's video. And this week I thought it'd be fun to do the cover of my comic that I'm working on for the Halloween period. But I've also thought that I would use this video to talk about thumbnails. What are thumbnails? Now, thumbnails are a way for you to roughly work out how an illustration is going to look before you do the actual final process. Think of it as showing your workings out before showing a finalized product. Not only does this help speed up your process, but it also helps when you are doing client work for a client to understand how an illustration is going to be laid out. So using this character Plumpkin, our little pumpkin kitty, we're going to show how we've laid out an overall illustration and come to understand the fundamentals of what we're doing. Now, I already had an idea of what I wanted to do. I wanted to have something very similar to a Prickles piece that I had done, where I have the character surrounded by the thing that relates to them. So getting my mixed media paper, the first thing I'm going to do after I have sketched out my overall thumbnails and rough ideas is choose my favorite, and then this speed ups the process by tenfold. It's actually ridiculous how much you can speed up a sketching process by simply doing thumbnails first. Thumbnails are a fundamental exercise in coming to understand what works with an illustration and what doesn't work. By having the thumbnail, not only was I able to try various ideas and not settle for my first idea, I found an idea that I was really happy with, was able to move around the sketch process a little bit more, and this meant when it came to the actual finalized sketch, the finalized sketch for this, the rough idea, took me a whole minute and a half. Now that may seem like a little bit overkill to do thumbnails before you do a finalized sketch, but this means that when you have an idea in your head, you're able to break it down into different sections. One of the things that I find that is really helpful with thumbnailing is instead of it making sure it's all clean, it's come to understand and break it down into simple shapes. So you'll notice in the thumbnails, I essentially had where the character was, how I wanted the pinpoint of the character to be, and have the things around it. This meant that not only was I able to understand where everything was going to be laid out and how I was going to do the overall finalized illustration, it meant that I was going to understand what colors I was going to use where colors would clash, and how I could break up all the orange that I was going to end up using. Now, the thing is with a character that is a pumpkin that is surrounded by pumpkins, and there's going to be a lot of orange here. So what we are going to use with this illustration is we're going to use different variants of orange and have it really focus on the central point. This is what I'm doing from the thumbnail sketch to the finalized piece. This helps me come to understand how the breakdown of the overall illustration is. So that's step one of going from thumbnail to finalized sketch. Now, the good thing is about actually breaking down from your thumbnail to your finalized sketch is that you're spending less time working out on your final piece. Sometimes when I do an illustration, I'll do a few thumbnails, but if I have a solid idea of what I'm doing, I will go with that. But if I don't have an idea of what I'm doing, I will do several thumbnails before I finalize what I'm going to sketch and what I'm going to do. Think of it almost as showing your workings out before going to the finalized product. This will help when you are looking at client work. This will help with your personal work. It's really important how we use thumbnails to determine our finalized product. It is something that I see quite a few illustrators not do, and then they get to a point where they struggle on how to place certain things in the illustration, and thumbnails really do help. I cannot stress that enough. So essentially, after I've done my very loose sketch, I go over with WHSmith pencils to finalize my sketch. Now, since I'm going for a very watercolor approach, I'm not using harsh lines here, so I'm using some very soft pencil lines, which I'm then going to build up with watercolor. Here we are going to be using the Ecoline watercolors because they're bright, they're vibrant, and it's going to go for the type of illustration that I'm going for. Now you'll notice in the thumbnail to the finalized piece, I used a very limited palette, and that's what I was kind of going for. Considering with the Ecoline colours, we are only using 5 colours in total. We want to try and use as many variants of those colours as possible, some colour combinations to really try and break up an illustration. Limited palettes can sometimes be your best friend because by limiting what colours you are going to do, you can make a really striking illustration. Essentially all this illustration is orange browns and greens. It's just variance in between there to allow an illustration to look a little bit more lifted. I'm trying to use lighter colours towards the front and darker colours towards the back. This will create the illusion that the illustration has more depth to it overall. And this is something that I was trying to work out when thumbnailing. When I was doing different pieces, I was trying to understand how I could get the cat to be central, but also to have this sort of like build around to it, so your eye would go around in a circle but always be drawn to the central point. It's really important when it comes to illustration to come to understand what your points of view are going to be and how you can break down the illustration. Thumbnailing helps speed up the process and for you to understand the better variance that your work could be. For example, the first idea I had for this, I thought was going to be perfect. I thought that was the idea, but I did a few thumbnail pieces afterwards to come to understand, hey, maybe this could work in a different way. What if I tried this? What if I tried this? And it's good to get those other variants of the same idea out of your head, so then you can look at it and go, okay, so this works from this one, this works from this one. If I could combine that in my thumbnail sketch, how does that look? Is that a better piece? This is sort of like my trick for speeding up the illustration process. I do end up doing a lot of work. I can do 2 to 3 pieces, sometimes 5 to 10 pieces a week, depending on how busy my week is overall and how I'm feeling that week. But I always thumbnail sketch my ideas. So if I have a drawing idea that I just can't seem to get out of my head, I really want to do an illustration at a later date, maybe when I have a little bit more time, I will quickly thumbnail ideas, come to understand and break down simple shapes, so that when I come to actually do the illustration, all my workings out are there and I'll have a bit more time to work on it. This is another way to, say if you've got quite a few ideas and say you don't have time for it, for you to be able to go back and go, okay, this is why this worked, this colour works for this doesn't work, and then you can thumbnail those, and when you come to the finalised illustration, it speeds up that process a lot more. It's also a really good way to not forget ideas. I'm a type of person who has like a million ideas running through my head at once, and when I have a million ideas running through my head at once, it can be quite difficult to pinpoint what I want to do at that time. If I'm really struggling for an idea on a day, say I'm having a little bit of art block, I don't know what to do, I'll go through my sketchbook, look at what thumbnails I've done, look at what illustrations I've sketched out for ideas for the future, and then it hits my brain, it pings, and I sit there and go, okay, this is how I can improve this process. It's really good for art block, I would say, if you could call it art block, mainly because you've got a sketchbook full of ideas that you can go back at and go, okay, so this illustration didn't work this time, so let's see how it would work if I tried it in a different way. It's always looking at the same thing from different perspectives and trying out different things. This is why thumbnailing is so important, and I'm going to keep saying that throughout this video. It is such a fundamental part of illustration. It is such a fundamental part of any art piece, anything that you want to do, coming to understand your workings out before the finalized piece. So now I've gone on enough about thumbnails, let's actually talk about the piece. So I am using Equaline watercolours here, and I'm using these because they're very bright and very colourful. They mix really well. I'm still kind of getting used to them, but they're a really fun liquid watercolour to use. They're on the cheaper end of the liquid watercolours, and I've really enjoyed using them. In fact, I've used them for a few videos now. I just really like the vibrancy that I can get with colours that I can't quite achieve with pan colours alone. The only difference is that once you put down the colour, because the colour is so bright and so vibrant, it can be quite difficult to lift off. So it's always best to work from lighter to darker, mainly because once you've put that darker tone down, you are going to struggle a little bit. Overall, when you are looking at the paper I'm using, I really should have used some watercolour paper for this instead of using my mixed media. At the time, I wasn't quite sure what medium I was going to use when I actually decided to do on watercolours. I realised that I should have changed paper. Ideally, I would have used a hot press paper for this, because the hot press paper would have allowed me to build up some really nice layers. Cold press paper is nice, but it has a texture to it, and I don't always like using cold press pressed paper unless I'm using a lot of water. I really like the look and the feel of hot pressed paper, especially considering I can get a really nice vibrant colour tone on it. I really should have switched out my paper, but I was already halfway through the illustration when I'd already decided that I was like, I should have used this. I really do enjoy trying out different mediums. I think there's some stuff that you can't quite achieve with mediums on its own. With this piece, I knew exactly what I wanted. I knew I wanted it to be a very central piece, a very character-based piece, mainly because this is going to be the cover for a comic that I'm releasing in October, late October actually. This is the Halloween version of Prickles. Plumpkin, I like to call her. She's fat, she's chubby, and she lives in a pumpkin patch. I've done a few videos of her in the past, but she's a reoccurring character that's popped up a few times, and it's perfect for the Halloweeny season that is coming up. It is time to get spooky after all. But overall, I really am happy with this illustration. I added some polychromos pencils on top just to add a little bit more texture that I didn't quite achieve with just the Ecoline alone, and some white gel just to pop out certain areas. But mainly this piece is an Ecoline watercolour piece. Overall, it's fun. I like drawing pumpkin cats. I like drawing cats. I like drawing animals. It's so much fun. I love doing children's based style illustration. It's possibly one of my favourite things to do, mainly because I get a nice broad range of colour to use. Plus, it's just a lot of fun to design fun characters. I hope this video has been somewhat helpful, and I hope thumbnailing does help speed up your process and helps you understand like how to break down your illustration into simple shapes and really broaden your horizons. Thumbnailing is so important. I cannot stress that enough. But I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. I do hope you have a lovely day. Make sure to draw, have lots of fun, and as always folks, stay creative.